How soon could Elon Musk realistically send humans to Mars? Ah, another good question.
I have strong views on that. My read of the history of space exploration is such that we do big, expensive things only when it's geopolitically expedient, such as we feel threatened by an enemy. And so for him to just say, let's go to Mars because it's the next thing to do, what does that venture capitalist meeting look like? So, Elon, what do you want to do? I want to go to Mars. How much will it cost? $1 trillion. Is it safe? No, people will probably die. What's the return on the investment? Nothing. That's a 5-minute meeting, and it doesn't happen. So,
well, Musk's response to deGrasse Tyson on X was tetchy, to say the least. He wrote, wow, they really don't get it. Mars is critical to the long-term survival of consciousness. I realise that it makes no sense as an investment. That's why I'm gathering resources. So does one of the world's finest minds really just not get it? Well, let's find out. I'm rejoined on Uncensored by Professor Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil, great to see you.
Elon Musk's dream of colonizing Mars has sparked both awe and skepticism. In this explosive discussion with Neil deGrasse Tyson on Piers Morgan Uncensored, they dive into the technical hurdles, moral questions, and the sheer audacity of turning a sci-fi vision into reality.
yeah, thanks for having me back. Good to see you again.
You just don't get it, says Elon Musk. Your response?
Well, first of all, I'm not a fan of commenting on what other people commented about what was commented upon. that's just fuel for clickbait on social media. So rather than just respond to what people responded, let me just say I've read extensively about the history of big, expensive projects in our species, going from the pyramids to the Great Wall of China to the Manhattan Project. And you go down that list, and the greatest of them, the biggest of them, the most expensive of them, related to the survival of who participated in it. They felt threatened. And so, sorry, the pyramids was not that. That was praise of royalty or deity. That's another big driver that existed in the history of our species. Much less of that happens today. And most of it is driven by the I don't want to die gene. And so we went to the moon. We felt threatened by the Russians, the godless commies, around the world. And so these are the motivations that enable people to write checks. And at any time people said, let's do it because it's the natural next thing to do, it just never happens.
Let's pause here for a second. It's fascinating how Elon Musk's vision for Mars isn't just about exploration. He frames it as essential for humanity's survival. But what Neil deGrasse Tyson points out is something we don't always consider: the sheer practicality and geopolitical factors driving such monumental projects throughout history. Think about it. When was the last time humanity took on a massive endeavor like this without some global crisis or competition pushing us forward?
If you go back to the Apollo era, while we were going to the moon, people forgetting that we went there as a militaristic statement, people who forgot that said, oh, we're on the moon by 1969, we'll be on Mars by 1985. They were just extending a timeline that they thought was a natural, inevitable thing. And nothing that's expensive is ever inevitable. So that's the foundations of my comment. And in terms of going to Mars as a survival plan, if you think about what could put life at risk here on Earth, that could include, global, very serious pandemic, or asteroid strikes, or we trash the climate, whatever. To think of Mars as Earth 2.0 could only really happen after you terraform Mars. And the point I made, which was not in your clip, was if you have the power of geoengineering to terraform Mars, then you have the power of geoengineering to fix Earth and turn Earth back into Earth, as opposed to Mars back into Earth. So just realistically, shipping 1 billion people to Mars, or however many, by the way, I have nothing against that. I just don't see it happening based on my read of human behavior.
So a lot to unpack there. Look, I've got massive respect for you. I also have a lot of respect for Musk. I also like the fact that he dares to dream very big. And I actually had the honour, I would describe it, of spending a couple of hours with him down in France in the summer, where we got into the colonisation of Mars and why he felt so passionately about it. And he said a few things. One, he said, we have to do this because at some stage planet Earth is just not going to be a viable place anymore, was his belief. Secondly, that inevitably at some stage, planet Earth will be incinerated by the sun anyway. We don't know when that'll happen, but one day it will happen. I'll get your response to that.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. Musk isn't just a dreamer or an engineer. He's also deeply embedded in the political and financial ecosystems. If his partnerships with the U.S. government grow stronger, could he leverage those connections to make Mars colonization a national or even global priority? And what does that mean for the rest of us? Are we seeing the next space race being shaped not by nations, but by individuals with the influence of entire governments?
We do know when it'll happen, but yeah.
When will it happen on that point?
Oh, yeah, let me check my calendar.
Right, but I mean,
No, the sun will
do we have any idea when that may happen?
Yeah, the sun will transition into a red giant phase, assuming it behaves like every other star, just like it. And as it does, its outer shell will expand, and the surface of the sun will get closer and closer to Earth, and it will evaporate. Our oceans will come to a rolling boil and evaporate into the atmosphere. The atmosphere will evaporate into space, and Earth will be a charred ember that will get swallowed
Why
by
are
the
you
sun.
laughing,
And Mars,
Neil? This
being
is not
farther
funny.
from the sun,
You're painting a picture of utter extinction and apocalypse. Why are you laughing?
Neil deGrasse Tyson painted a vivid picture of Earth's eventual demise as the sun swells into a red giant, boiling oceans and turning the planet into a charred ember. It's a haunting reminder of our planet's fragility. But here's the real question. If we already know the clock is ticking, should humanity be focusing more on fixing Earth or preparing to leave it behind?
yeah, that's it. No, because it's not that it's funny, it's that it's in 5 billion years.
Right.
So we have a whole lot of other sort of prioritized things we should be thinking about between now and
Okay.
then.
But on the
and by
principle,
then, we might have colonized other star systems.
right. So
That'd be fine.
here's the thing about Mars, though. He said, look, if we're going to do this, and he believes passionately we need to do this as a kind of backup, really, for the survival of the human species. He said you have to replicate exactly the conditions of Earth. And he said, for example, if you forget about one vitamin, everyone would die up there, right? So everything has to be replicated in a way that you can replicate exactly what happens here on Mars. From an astrophysicist's point of view, is that actually technically possible? Is there any reason why we couldn't colonize Mars from just a pure technical point of view of recreating the conditions in which human existence exists here?
Yeah, so just let me unpack that, what you said. So first of all, at the core of this, other than living in habitat modules, either underground or just, wherever, that have to be heated because Mars is very cold, and Mars has barely any atmosphere, so you have to pump that in as well. Short of that, Elon has great ambitions of terraforming Mars. I love it. I once stole a coffee mug from SpaceX that had Mars on it, and I kept it on my shelf for a very long time.
If we can develop the technology to terraform Mars into a livable planet, why not use that same capability to fix Earth instead? He frames it almost as a moral question. Should we dedicate our resources to saving the planet we already have, or pour them into creating a new one elsewhere?
Mr. Musk. So, and I didn't know that for like a year because I don't use them. I just collect them. But my point is that if you want to ship humans from Earth to Mars, Mars needs to kind of look like Earth. And by the way, it's tantalizingly close in properties relative to other planets. Venus is 900 degrees Fahrenheit. You're not going there. Mars is tipped on its axis. It has seasons. It has a approximately 24-hour day. It has polar ice caps, as we currently do. And so it's been the object of people's fascination for hundreds of years. So I don't have a problem with any of that. I'm just describing the practicality of it. And if you have the technology and the power to terraform Mars and ship people there, you probably have the ability to bat asteroids out of the way that might have been headed towards Earth. So I'm just speaking in practical terms. I'm not trying to stop anybody from dreaming. I love dreaming.
Well, that's the point I was going to make to you.
Ever got done.
Because I was watching the Bill Maher show live, actually, and that was the thing that struck me was, here's Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of the great dreamers, right? I mean, you literally have dreamed big your entire life. This is your raison d'etre, is to think the biggest things imaginable, right? And there you were, it appeared in the moment to be kind of pouring a bit of cold water on probably the biggest thinker on the planet right now and his massive, biggest dream. And that was the only thing I was, well, I thought, well, the next time I talk to you, I'm just, whether you were aware that that was the way you were coming over.
As the discussion heats up, Neil raises a thought-provoking scenario. What if Elon's Mars ambitions become a geopolitical necessity? Imagine a future where space exploration isn't just about curiosity or dreams, but a strategic move to ensure survival. Could the next space race be the key to Mars colonization, driven not by choice but by necessity? And if so, are we truly ready to stake humanity's future on such a gamble?
I'm just trying to be real. I mean, I'm in my old age. I've just seen how people behave. I see how things get funded. Now, of course, Elon plus one or two other, that's all it would take, one or two other very wealthy people in the world could, if they wanted, as basically a vanity project, send astronauts to Mars. But if you want to think of the return on that investment, SpaceX is a corporation. All right, it's not just some private venture. He's getting money and contracts, and he's paying salaries, and I presume there's a board helping him make decisions about that. And so, in the real world, there's certain things that are more likely to happen than others.
But if you but let me push you on that. But let me challenge you on that. So let's go back to the start of the 20th century, okay? When there would have been people around who were saying, you know what, let's go to the moon. And people would have dismissed them and said, don't be so ridiculous. It's massively, prohibitively expensive. We don't really have the technology to do this, blah, 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 blah. It was only really the power of people's dreams. Now, ultimately, you're right. There was a military context to why we did it. The West wanted to beat Russia up there. I get that. I get that. But at the same time, I remember the great speeches by Kennedy, about all this. And it was exciting. It was thrilling. The world watched as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, and those dreams that were dismissed at the early part of the century actually came true. They happened. Could it be that you're just, I hesitate to say this, Neil, but could it be you're just, you're one of the doomsayers of the earlier 20th century saying we should never go to the moon because it's too expensive, it can't happen, blah, 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 which they must have been saying at the time.
As the conversation turns more philosophical, one big question emerges. Are we dreaming of Mars because we've given up on Earth? Tyson hints at a deeper issue, our willingness to pour resources into escaping problems rather than solving them here.
I am way more deeply informed than your previous sentence implies. So a couple of things. Going up to the launch of Sputnik, most naysayers about the moon had no confidence that we would ever accomplish such a feat. And they didn't have an understanding of the progress of science and technology and engineering and political will, geopolitical will. So that was not in the equation of how they were thinking about their future. And so now when Sputnik got launched, what happened? Oh my gosh, space was pierced. And if it's pierced, that means we can do anything in space. And beginning in the early 1960s, the predictions about the future flipped. And it wasn't, oh, we'll never do it. They'll say, we'll do it all. And that's why we'll have colonies on Mars. Do you know Werner von Braun was even quoted as saying, by the year 2000, we'll have the first human born on a moon colony. So highly ambitious statements, but why didn't any of that happen? Because we didn't go to the moon because it was because it's in our DNA, or it's because, no, we went because we were scared. And the speech you remember from John Kennedy, where he says, we'll put a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth, that's a stirring speech. And the hair rises up on the back of your neck. You can hear him in his Brookline, Massachusetts accent reciting this. But that's not what wrote the checks. That same speech, May 25th, 1961, to a joint session of Congress, 6 weeks after Yuri Gagarin had come out of orbit, 6 weeks. Wouldn't utter the man's name. Before that, part of the speech that we all remember and that's chiseled in the granite at Kennedy Space Center, there's a part that's not chiseled in the granite. You know what it says? I'm paraphrasing. If the events of recent weeks couldn't even say Yuri Gagarin, if the events of recent weeks are any indication of the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere, then we need to show the world the path of freedom over the path of tyranny. That was the battle cry against communism, and that's what wrote the checks in Congress.
Thanks for tuning in. Whether it's saving Earth or reaching for the stars, the debate doesn't end here. If this sparked your curiosity, hit like, subscribe, and share your take in the comments. Let's keep the conversation alive. Catch you in the next one.